Welcome back to another episode of Logistics Remix. Today's episode is all about how brands can unlock margin and growth through smarter freight, fulfillment, and operations. Our guest today is Keyan Bazargan, founder of Iron Margin, a consultancy that helps 7- and 8-figure e-commerce brands simplify logistics and find real savings. Keyan, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
Yeah, excited to have you and for this chat today. Well, let's kick things off with an introduction. Before Iron Margin, Keyan was running operations at Freak Athlete, where he helped save 6 figures in freight and fulfillment costs. Now, prior to that, Keyan has worked in various operations roles, most notably as VP of Operations at Greener Printer. As a former collegiate athlete, Keyan loves to stay active outside of work, with his favorite sport being basketball. What I thought we'd do first, Keyan, is start off with Iron Margin. It's a new company that you started, so wanted to hear more about why you started the company and what problems you're helping to solve for brands.
Absolutely. Yeah. So Iron Margin, we started earlier this year. It's a consultancy to help 7- and 8-figure D2C brands specifically. And the reason for starting it is in my career so far, I had helped a commercial print company and then a gym equipment company with their operations. And what I realized is that a lot of the things that I had learned is very applicable to other brands in different industries. So the way I like to think about it is, at the end of the day, for my role, a lot of it just comes down to weight and dimensions and what's in the box. So, whether it's furniture, supplements, skincare, all the popular D2C industries, I feel like there's a lot of lessons that can be passed along. And so that's why I wanted to go out on my own and try and help as many brands as I can.
That's awesome. And we're going to talk about some of those insights you gained on the episode today. So can't wait to jump into it. But really congrats. I think it's fantastic that you started on the entrepreneurial journey. Now, you've got this track record of generating, significant savings. We're talking like multiple 6 figures that you saved a Freak Athlete. And I'm just wondering if these are in areas that people just often overlook, right, when they're running their operations. So curious if you can walk us through the biggest drivers of those savings.
Yeah, I definitely do think a lot of it is overlooked. I think a common sentiment that I hear out there quite a bit is that you need to get to a certain scale to unlock savings. And while scale definitely does help, there's a lot of strategies that allow the smaller players actually to have a more cost-effective supply chains than a lot of bigger players a lot of the time. So happy to dive deep into those strategies, but they span the entire supply chain, all the way from manufacturing all the way to last mile delivery. And happy to go into depth on more of those specific areas.
Yeah, I'd love to do that. Because one of the things that you've posted on, I follow you on LinkedIn. You've got some really great posts. If anyone's not following Keyan on LinkedIn, get on LinkedIn, look up his profile, hit follow. He's got some really great content for you. And we'll share more about this today. We'll dive into some of these insights. But one of the things that that you've posted about was improving contribution margin by first reducing time spent on operational fires and focusing more on important problems. Now, I call this working more on the business, not in the business. Can you unpack that idea and why it's often a strategy you recommend?
Yeah, for sure. So I think smaller brands out there, sure, you can save right away, focus on cost right away, and you're going to have some nice looking percentage improvements. But at the end of the day, if you're not at the scale yet, those cost improvements don't really matter on a nominal level. So when I come across smaller brands, I think it's much more important for them to lock in their products, lock in their marketing, make sure that customer experience is smooth as butter. So if you have to pay a little bit more for faster shipping, using the most reliable carriers out there, go ahead and do that. Make sure that you have a business that has such a good foundation so that it's scaling properly. And then when you have those systems in place, I think that's when companies should start to look into costs. So that's when you can start looking at strategies to cut down on freight, cut down on fulfillment, cut down on last mile shipping. But I think for all brands out there, it's more important to get smooth first, have good software in place, Don't have a bunch of people complaining in your customer service about fulfillment issues. Make sure you're on time. Do that before even thinking about these cost improvements.
Totally. So it's all about kind of figuring out your happy path, right? It's setting the foundation for your operational needs and for your customers, I guess, satisfaction. Now, you also mentioned something interesting. You mentioned that many brands don't really know their true contribution margin because various factors, fluctuating tariffs and shipping rates and different operational expenses. So what's your process for working with a brand to calculate the real numbers when it comes to contribution margin?
Yeah, I think this is so important. Knowing your actual numbers sets the stage to even improve in the first place. So when I work with brands, one of the first things I ask them for is just to see how they've calculated their gross profit, their contribution margin, and then I'll third party kind of audit what their numbers are. And pretty much every time I find differences, and it's not because the brand is not looking into everything, but you have to take into consideration that there's variations based on the SKU, there's variations based on the channel, there's variations based on the geography. So, for example, UK shipping is going to be cheaper than US a lot of the time. So there's all these different variables that go into it. And then within each category, take last mile shipping, for example, all the organizations that you work with, they will give you pricing, but often calculating pricing for a given area like last mile shipping is not so black and white and straightforward. Oftentimes I'll actually have to engage with the organizations in their supply chain themselves to constantly ask follow-up questions to uncover pieces of information that neither of us had known so that we can get to the bottom of what their actual costs are. So that's step one. Of course, you don't need to go crazy and be perfect, but you want to have a reliable sense of, especially for your hero SKUs and your main sales regions and channels, you want to have a pretty good idea of what those numbers are at. That's the baseline that'll allow you to improve from there.
Yeah, so it sounds like the 80-20 rule, right? Don't focus on every single thing. What's driving 80%? What are the 20% of your SKUs that are driving 80% of your contribution margin, and focus on in the areas where you're selling first. Focus on that and then come back and get those other kind of long tail SKUs is what you're trying. But what's interesting, what you said was you're also talking to the providers. And so you're not just getting involved in terms of supporting the brand by consulting them. You're also talking to providers. You're also going deeper. Is that what I heard?
That's correct. That's typically what I found the fastest way to do things. There's a certain speed element and a certain language that I think you need to speak with to be able to move things quicker. What I'll typically do is keep the brand looped in all the way. Because ultimately what I want to do as a consultant is I want the brand to gain the knowledge that I have. I don't want it to be some black box where I'm doing the work, but they have no idea what's going on, because the reality is even if we save a bunch of money in month 1 and month 2, this is something that needs to be done forever if you want to stay in the game. So brands that, I've worked with in the past, I expect to have to continue to work with, or they can develop that skill themselves, not need me anymore, and know who to work with, the right way to negotiate, where to look to lower costs, because you need to do it for the duration of the life of your business. You can't just do it one time.
I love that. You're not just doing it for them, but you're also teaching them the ropes so they can 100%. Go out and they can continue to grow the business and do it themselves without having to rely on someone like you all the time. Or maybe they come back to you as their business changes and as the stages of their business change. I think that's fantastic. Teach them how to do it on their own. I think that's really valuable proposition to provide to your customers. Curious, as you're working with these brands, what are some of the most common operational mistakes you're seeing these 7-8 figure brands making when it comes to specifically in logistics?
For sure. Yeah. Well, we can start on that chain at the very end, last mile shipping. This is a category that I think, especially now, is one where there's a lot of savings to be had. Number one, I know that the main carriers, FedEx, USPS, UPS are all raising their prices. There are alternate carriers available. So I think the power is in the hands of the brands. And if you know how to navigate the landscape, there's a lot of tools out there that can be very helpful for you. So one common mistake I see is if a brand doesn't have multiple options and they're kind of locked into a agreement with only one carrier, you're going to be at their mercy. If they want to raise the prices, you're going to take it, and there's nothing you can do about it. So I highly recommend having multiple carriers, rate shopping on every single order. And then depending on your scale, you might want to go directly to the carriers and negotiate. Or if you're a little bit smaller, it might make sense to use an aggregator service who's able to pool their volume and get you better rates. So I'll pause there, but last mile shipping is one of the most common areas that brands can find quick savings.
Yeah, I'll agree there. I kind of call it this kind of past year has been a tale of two cities in parcel. You've got the national carriers that are continuing to raise fuel surcharges, sorrow charges. They're introducing demand surcharges that are highest ever recorded. And then you've got, these alternative carriers that maybe don't cover every single zip code, but they cover their specific region. However, they're going to provide the cost savings and that you just can't get from trying to negotiate better rates with nationals. And they continue to drive rates lower. So it's like, tale of two cities in parcel. One is driving prices higher. The other one's driving prices lower. I'm with you. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Last mile deliveries is just too important in order to keep your costs down. You gotta focus on that. So I like that you're working backwards from there. Let's go into the next thing. Like what else are you seeing in terms of operational mistakes when it comes to logistics?
Yeah, I have something that I want to share on freight and fulfillment. But one other thing I did want to mention for last mile is obviously we just focused what we just said on cost, but there's also the performance. And I know a lot of the bigger brands out there are a little concerned to trust non-household brand names. Luckily, there's a lot of ways, especially with aggregator carriers, where you can slowly ease into it, right? So you might start with some rates that only use FedEx, UPS, maybe DHL, and then make sure everything's running smoothly, and they'll allow you to slowly introduce in other carriers into the mix. And as long as performance is still solid, you get to kind of like wet your feet a little bit. That's a nice like kind of ramp period. So I don't really recommend going from, where you're at now, getting the most savings right away. I tend to want to take them down this path where the savings are continuing to improve, because we're constantly testing the performance the entire way throughout.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great strategy. Don't dive into the pull both feet, right? So you got to wet your toes, try it out, make sure the performance, because at the end is still there. Because at the end of the day, look at consumers are going to, it's the repeat customers that are going to make that brand the most money, right? Because that brand wants to make more sales than just one to their customers. And so if they have a bad delivery experience, of course, they're not going to come back. I just think delivery experience is just such a big part of the extension of the brand. And so I'm right there with you. I think, ensure that, there might be a huge carrot to go save some money, but make sure you're not diving straight into the deep end and dip your toes, test it. It looks good. Keep going. I love that. Awesome. Let's keep moving. I would love to hear about the fulfillment and some of the other pieces that you are seeing where, some of these operational mistakes are being made.
Yeah. So I think another area is freight. On the surface, it doesn't really seem like an area where there's a lot of things you can change. It's, for the most part, whatever the rates are on the market, that's typically what you need to accept. What I have noticed, though, is getting to a certain volume threshold can be very beneficial here. So, and there's ways to kind of manipulate that a little bit. So, for example, there's a brand that I was working with. They were shipping LCL instead of FCL. And the reason for that is they just didn't quite have enough volume to reach FCL. But what we realized is...
And can you define that? Sorry. Can you define that just in case someone's not familiar with that term, LCL and FCL?
Yeah, so FCL is full container load. That means that you're filling up an entire container with just your stuff. Typically, it'll be somewhere around 20 full pallets. And then LCL is loose container load. So you're actually sharing that container with other brands. So the reason why the pricing for LCL is 2 to 3 times more expensive is because there's actual, there's work that needs to go in that's a little bit extra. So for example, when that container arrives, human people need to go in and actually separate out the stuff for multiple different parties. So I understand why it's more expensive. I think it's important to get to that full container load as soon as you can. One way to kind of make that happen a bit faster, obviously, if sales are going great, that works. The other way is if you're able to reduce the number of shipments you do per year. So for example, instead of shipping monthly, you might move to bi-monthly so that you can actually fill up a full container. And I would only recommend that if your product line is pretty stable, like sales are very trustworthy. Typically the savings on moving up to a full container load will much outweigh having extra inventory on hand in your fulfillment warehouse. So I did the math for one brand, and it's life-changing kind of money. I mean, for the brand, right? It's like just pure money that goes back into net income at the end of the day when you save on your cost of goods sold.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's huge. That's a great strategy. I think it's really you're driving costs down. Now these savings are what you said is they're dropping straight to the bottom line.
Yeah,
and you can see them. They're like, this is real savings, real dollars that brand gets to save, maybe even reinvest, right? So they may drop to the bottom line, but now you've got all that money, extra capital to go spend on maybe marketing, PR, driving more sales, and then becomes just a cycle of savings being reinvested into growing the business. That's awesome. Anything else you want to share about just the common operational mistakes? Maybe one more thing.
Fulfillment, I would just say you should invest the money and time to go visit a warehouse in person. I've personally visited over 20 in the past year in person, and you'll find night and day differences just in terms of the impression that you get from the team, how clean the warehouse is. You're just going to learn things that you wouldn't find out over a video call. So I highly recommend doing that.
I think that's a great one. I think firsthand experience cannot be replaced. And so you can't, and this is such an important partnership ultimately, that if you don't go out and see these partners right in person, you're not really exactly sure what you're getting yourself into. And especially if they're doing the majority or all of your fulfillment, which brings us to our next thing, because one of the things that I know you and I discussed talking about is kind of this stage of a brand when they're starting out, right? They're typically shipping out of their garage or maybe their home, inside their home. And eventually there comes this growth and time to decide on when to step up operations, whether to go it alone, rent a warehouse facility, hire staff, and do their own shipping out of that warehouse once they graduate from home, or you work with a 3PL, a fulfillment company. Maybe just tell the audience a little bit more, like what is a 3PL, like what's their function? And then I'm curious about, we'll get into kind of what's your view. I want to pick your brain on what's your view on working with that 3PL. You mentioned going out and visiting them, but when does it make sense? How should brands partner, manage their relationships? I think there's a couple of things we can unpack, but maybe first kind of define what's the function of a fulfillment company and why would someone want to work with them?
For sure. Yeah. So fulfillment companies, 3PLs, what they're really going to do for brands is they have expertise, equipment, technology. They pay the rent or they're renting. They've the same way you've specialized in your business, they've specialized in the process of pick, packing, and sorting goods. And similar to what I said early on the call, for them, whether it's furniture in the box, gym equipment in the box, for them, it's also, it's the same thing, right? So they don't need to necessarily be an expert on gym equipment or your specific vertical. They need to be good at picking, packing, delivering with 100% accuracy. And yeah, I mean, basically, if you believe in paying for expertise, So you can focus your time on what you're best at, which is probably developing your product and marketing your product, then that's why you would do it.
Makes sense. That totally makes sense. So brands, let's say the brand gets to that stage where they're just busting at the seams, they're in their garage, and all of a sudden they're looking around and saying, okay, I can't handle more business out of my garage. Like at what point does it make sense to say, and what's that thought process, right, for that brand? Like you've probably been in several of these conversations. What's that thought process of, do I do it alone? Do I go with a 3PL? And then if I go with a 3PL, like how do I partner with someone? You already gave us a good insight, but I'd love to pick your brain and hear some more.
For sure. Yeah. So, I've seen it done both ways. So, the last company that I work for, Freak Athlete, we utilize 3PLs. Another company, a 7-figure soap brand that I'm helping, they manufacture their own product in-house. One difference that I've noticed in kind of the way they market their product is the soap company, they're very much marketing their product with manufacturing as a key function of that marketing. So they want people to see them making the soap themselves. They want people to experience the quality. And it's something that I think they want, as a founding team, it's something that means a lot to them to be able to run their own shop and keep things up in person. They're probably thinking very long term about this being meaningful, and I think it really depends on what you want. I think the founder ultimately needs to have an honest conversation. Once you've grown out of that garage, you need to be honest with yourself about what are you trying to build. If you're trying to build a company that's going to scale quickly and you want to focus on developing more and more products, moving quickly, marketing, and kind of scaling as fast as you can, then for that person, I'd recommend going the 3PL route. But if you're thinking of your business in terms of decades and you're not necessarily concerned about how fast you get there, but more the journey, I would probably recommend going keeping it in-house in that case. Even if it's more headache, it'll be a pain in the ass at times. You'll have growing pains, but that's ultimately a founder decision in my view.
Totally. And I think you've got to, at some point you got to make that decision and go one way or another. And it's really interesting. I mean, I think the good news is there's plenty of options. The bad news is there's plenty of options. Like you said, you may have to go visit. So, and you've been to 20. I don't think anyone's got time to go visit 20 because they have a business to run. So, are there any tips on, how to find one, partner with them? Like any kind of insights, tips, that you can give some brands?
Yeah, I would say referrals are definitely going to be your friend. Every D2C brand out there can find probably another founder out there who's in a similar product category or has similar weights or has similar needs when it comes to kitting their product or whatever your special requirements are. There's some other brand out there that has been doing it for at least a couple years. They've learned lessons probably, and some of them will, they're diehards for their 3PL. So if someone ever gives you a diehard recommendation for their 3PL and they're in the same industry as you, that definitely means a lot. So referrals in general is going to be a great way to go. And then second thing, I would highly recommend a large amount of volume just in the types of conversations that you have. Don't just talk to 2 or 3. You might be better off talking to 10 or 20. Some of them might tell you that you're not a good fit. Some of them, the pricing may not work. Others might not have an ideal location. So you're going to have some conversations that ultimately won't pay off. But I think the more volume you have at the start, the more you utilize referrals, you'll get closer to a point where in a few weeks, you'll have 3 really solid options that you can consider.
That's awesome. Great tip. I mean, it's just like choosing a restaurant, right? If a friend of mine just went to a restaurant and they're just going crazy, just saying it's like the best thing they've ever tried, they've ever eaten. I mean, I can't wait to go. Right. So it's one of those. So, I think, definitely recommendations from other brands is a big one, because they have a lot of that experience, or, maybe they can just contact you since you've seen these facilities and you get to see a wide variety of brands using 3PLs. One thing, actually, one thought I just had was you talked about locations. So some 3PLs have one location, some 3PLs have multiple locations. Probably has to do with wanting to have inventory kind of spread throughout the country, maybe closer to your customer base. In some cases, you may want to have inventory where you can reach customers, 90% of the time within next day or in 2 days. Any thoughts there, since you are working with some of these larger, not just startup brands, but larger brands, and how do those conversations typically go when you start thinking about like, all right, we're in one facility, let's go to two. Things get a lot more complex. Do you want to use two 3PLs? Do you want to stay with one that's got two facilities? Any thoughts there? Right. Just curious, since you've got some battle tested experience in this space.
Definitely, yeah. So if you have one 3PL and that 3PL partner has a second location, the benefits of that are going to be that you'll be able to, for the most part, use the same WMS, talk to the same points of contact. I think a lot of brands underestimate the extra management that gets involved when you have two separate 3PLs. So one 3PL brand maybe on the West Coast, one 3PL brand on the East Coast is not going to be as efficient as if you had two nodes from the same 3PL. So that's what I would say in terms of scaling. For the most part, by having two nodes, your last mile shipping costs will cut down. But I have seen some interesting rate cards out there where it's actually not as big of a factor. So I think it's highly context dependent in terms of pricing. Storage can be different depending on what city they're in, if they're more rural or more urban. And also you'll want to consider if you're importing to, say, the Port of Los Angeles and your 3PL is in LA versus if it was in Utah, there's going to be a bit of an extra transportation cost to get it to Utah. So you don't want to look at any of these factors alone by themselves. This is why I highly recommend having a full landed cost view when you're comparing 3PL decisions side by side.
Awesome. I think that that calculation is something that you provide to customers on your website. Is that right? Do you give away? You've got like a giveaway where it's when I visit your website, you provide them with your template and your model for how you calculate these costs. Kind of what is it? Can you tell us more about that? Because I'm kind of curious. I saw it on your website. I thought that was really cool. Like, hey, here's what I do for customers. I'm just going to give it to you and you try to use it yourself.
Yeah. So yeah, I will say it's pretty bare bones intentionally. So, but it is a landed cost template that anyone can download for free. I've had some founders reach out to me and ask for it. And what I'll typically do is take that base, apply some of the, every brand they're going to have, some might have a bundle product as their hero SKU. So you might need to add more lines or whatever the case is for that individual brand. I'll tend to just throw in a 2-minute video or so, just kind of explaining the context around their brand. But it's a great place to start with just knowing at least what are all the variables just to make sure you're not missing anything. So it lays out everything from manufacturing all the way down to your last mile. So you're not missing any categories. And it's laid out in a way where you'll be able to compare 10 plus options side by side without having to scroll down or scroll to the right. So I found that this layout is a great place to start, partially because of its simplicity, and it's pretty easy to customize as well.
Awesome. In case anyone's interested, it's on the Iron Margin website, which is, give us the URL for that.
Yeah, it's www.ironmargin. So that's IRONMARGIN.com.
Awesome. Thanks. Appreciate that. Always good to give some helpful resources to the audience. Go ahead. It sounds like it's free. You can download it. And if you want an extra video with it, let Keyan know and he'll put it together for you. All right. So last one here. Because I know we have a limited time today together, but man, I'm having fun. I think these are some really great insights that you're sharing, and I really appreciate it. I think these brands could hopefully are listening, taking at least one or two tidbits from the show, and maybe apply them in their business. But last one here, for a brand that's listening right now that wants to make a tangible impact on their bottom line, what is the single most effective action that they can take in the next 30 days to unlock new margin?
Yeah. It's going to sound maybe like I'm plugging myself, but I think you should whether you do it yourself or you download the template that I have, take an hour out of your day and really try and figure out if you know what your numbers are. So you'll have an idea of what they are. Dive into each category. Think, is this actually the number, or am I making some assumption here? And just start asking your 3PLs and your manufacturer questions, right? Questions are the best way to boil this down. So don't pick a category and start tackling it yet. Ask questions, be extremely curious, and you'll find out a lot of information. I think you need to be relentless when it comes to finding the truth. Unfortunately, the truth is pretty hard to find in the logistics and manufacturing world, not intentionally, but because a lot of the partners out there don't want to overwhelm brands with information they don't find relevant. But if you ask them the right questions, you can start to team up with your manufacturers and your logistics partners to really find savings together. So I want you to take away that you're going to know. I want you to know there's things out there where your costs can be improved. Your logistics costs are not immutable like a lot of people might tell you. They are very variable. A lot of logistics partners are making good margin. There's a lot you can do just by having these conversations. So just be aware of that. That's what I would say.
That's awesome. I mean, listen, at the end of the day, like I said, if they can save that extra money. That extra money can go into growing their business and other use cases. So that's fantastic. I'm glad you shared that insight. And yeah, don't be shy of plugging the template and what you do. So appreciate that. But really appreciate all the insights here, Keyan. This was awesome. And thank you for sharing all your knowledge here. And I'm sure you're leaving some kind of behind the scenes. And if someone wants to reach out and learn more, brands listening here, they want to learn more about what you're doing, what Iron Margin's doing, how can they get in touch with you? What's the best way?
Yeah. So first off, I would say if you just want to follow along and get insights about supply chain just on an ongoing basis, I post pretty frequently on both LinkedIn and X. So on LinkedIn, just search my name, Keyan Bazargan. I'm sure maybe we'll have that spelled out so people can spell that correctly. And then on Twitter, it is Ops with Keyan, OPSWITHKEYAN. And then other than that, you'll be able to find me through those platforms. You'll be able to book a call or message me directly. It won't be too hard. So, anyone out there, happy to help. Even if you're not a good fit, I'll just tell you that it's not a good fit and just trying to help in any way that I can.
Yeah, we'll definitely we'll do something on the video where listeners, if you're on YouTube, you're watching this, you'll be able to see Twitter and LinkedIn and the website and how to reach out to Keyan. So that's fantastic. Keyan, thanks again for joining me on the show. Listeners, if you are looking for more expert insights like this, please don't forget to subscribe to the Logistics Remix channel on YouTube and give us a thumbs up. I greatly appreciate it. Keyan, I hope you had fun today. I know I did. So thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Awesome. And we will catch you on the next episode.